Hello, my name is Liz. In this lesson, I'm going to look at the types of topics that the examiner could ask you in IELTS Speaking Part 1. And at the end of this lesson, I'll give you a link so that you can take a look at the topics and questions for yourself. The examiner will probably ask you about 12 different questions in Speaking Part 1. And these questions come from usually 3 different topics. These topics are all familiar topics. They're topics that are common to everybody throughout the world. Now, the first topic of these 3 usually comes from one of these. Work, study, home or hometown. You will probably get one of them for your first topic. Work or study. Now, if the examiner decides to ask you about work or study, the first question that the examiner will ask is, do you work or do you study? Now, the examiner is asking this question only because he or she needs to know which topic to choose to ask the questions. So with this question, you do not need to expand your answer. You can just say very clearly, I work, I study. Now, if you're a student and you've finished university, but you're not working either, then you need to tell the examiner that, and you need to say, I've just finished university, but I don't have a job yet. And the examiner will then continue and ask you about the topic of study. Now, with these topics, the common questions that the examiner could ask you is often, where do you study or work? Why did you choose that subject or that job? The examiner might ask you about your first day, about the people that you work with or study with, and other things about your work or your studies. Now, for the topic of home, this topic is all about where you live. So it could be about your house or your apartment. And in that topic, the examiner can ask you about the rooms in the house, how they are decorated, so what you can see on the walls, or what kind of views you have from the windows. The examiner might also ask you about the people you live with or the area and street that you live in. And the last topic, hometown. Now, if you get the topic of hometown, this is about the place where you were born or where you spent most of your childhood. And for this topic, the examiner often asks you about places in your hometown, for example, buildings or old buildings in your hometown. The examiner might ask you about the weather or transportation in your hometown, or if you plan to still live there in the future. So those are usually, one of those will be your first topic for IELTS Speaking Part 1. But you have 2 more topics after this, so let's have a look at what kind of topics you can get next. Here is a list of 18 different topics. I would like you to have a look at the list and decide which ones you think you might be asked about in IELTS Speaking Part 1. Do you think the examiner might ask you about all of them or only some of them? Well, let's have a look. We've got family, friends, hobbies, weather, happiness, sport, food, clothes, school, flowers, shopping, computers, going out, newspapers, childhood, holidays, dictionaries, and transport. Do you think it's possible to get all of them in IELTS Speaking Part 1? Well, I will tell you that all these topics are possible in IELTS Speaking Part 1. I know that many people may have read or heard that topics in IELTS Speaking Part 1 are all easy. Unfortunately, they are not all easy. You can see here the topic of happiness, or flowers, or dictionaries. Sometimes the topics can be challenging. So one of the keys to preparing for IELTS Speaking Part 1 is to prepare topics. And that means to prepare ideas and vocabulary for all the different topics for IELTS speaking. So this is a list of some of the topics you can get in IELTS Speaking Part 1. If you would like to see more topics and questions as well, please follow the link here, and that will take you to my blog, www.ieltsliz.com. And in the blog you will find that there are topics and questions for Part 1, Part 2 and Part 3 of the IELTS speaking test. Well, that's all for this lesson. I will see you again in another IELTS lesson.